Hello designers! In this tutorial, we are going to create a very basic animated GIF on Adobe Photoshop. We are going to start with an image of an athlete or a dancer or perhaps an animal in motion. It's up to you. Here I'm using the quick selection tool so that I can create an instant selection of my subject matter. You guys are going to click Select Subject in the options bar and let Photoshop pretty much select it for you. As you know, the image selections aren't always perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on our image so that we can perfect the selection by adding onto it or taking away as necessary. So I zoomed into this area right between the helmet and the football, and I noticed that Photoshop selected some of the negative space by default. So I'm holding down Alt and using my quick selection tool so I can subtract from that area in the image. I also noticed Photoshop neglected to add the armpit, so I used Shift so I could hold down the quick selection tool and add to those areas in my selection and refine it further. So here you can see how I'm scrolling through the image and figuring out any other areas where I need to make any quick selection changes. Then what I want to do is refine my selection by smoothing it. So I'm going to the Select menu at the top of my workspace. I'm selecting Modify and Smooth. And I'm inputting a sample of 4 pixel radius to smooth out the corners of the image as much as possible. What I want to do here is actually open up my Paths panel by going to Window and Paths, and I'm going to click this little diamond icon at the bottom of the Paths panel so that the selection is turned into a path. Then I'm going to Edit. At the top of my workspace, I'm selecting Edit or Create Custom Shape, and I'm just going to go and give it a name and click OK. Having done that, this image is now basically a shape so that I can use it the same way that I would ellipses, triangles, rectangles, and so forth. I'm pretty much done with the image, so now I'm going to go to File and New, and I'm going to create a new document for web, and I'm selecting the Web Small preset. I'm changing the orientation to vertical because the football player obviously is a pretty long figure, so I'm selecting the portrait orientation and giving it a name before I click Create. Having done so, I'm now going to X out of that previous tab because I no longer need that image. I'm going to make sure my Layers panel is active. And then I'm going to create 6 blank layers by clicking the little plus sign icon at the bottom of the Layers panel. What helped me organize my layers was to name them by color. So every single layer should display a different color in your animated GIF. I'm going in rainbow order starting from purple, then blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. However, if those colors do not appeal to you, you can pretty much use any other colors you prefer. Now that I created a custom shape out of the football player, I'm going to use my vector shape tool, and I'm right-clicking on the vector shape tool so that I can look for the custom shape tool, which kind of looks like a squiggle. In the options bar, that's where I go and select the football player shape I just created. And I also want to make sure that I set it to pixels in the options bar, because this is going to ensure that when I drag out the shape, it doesn't create a separate layer for the vector shape. What I want to do now is I'm going to hold down Control and click inside the thumbnail so that it basically makes an instant selection of the shape. Then I'm using my gradient tool. In the options bar, I'm selecting where it says Classic Gradient, and I'm going to fill this with a combination of the colors that I labeled inside the layer. So for the first layer, it's using a combination of reds and magentas. So you can see how I'm basically editing that gradient by clicking on the color stops so that I can just select a more specific combination of colors to fill the shape with. Now I'm not deselecting. All I'm going to do is turn off the visibility of that first layer, then go to my next layer, which is orange. And here you can see how I'm using a pretty orange gradient. I'm getting rid of some of the colors that I don't want to use, and then just ensuring that all the colors I use moving forward reflect what I labeled that layer with. This is going to be a pretty repetitive process whereby I'm going to leave the selection active, so don't click Control D, don't deselect. All I'm doing is clicking on the subsequent layer, so right now I'm on the yellow layer. With the selection active, I'm going and basically filling that layer with different yellow values, and you guys will see that I'm basically turning off the visibility of each layer so I can see what I'm working with when I go to the layer below it. You guys know that I'm a sucker for layer effects, so I decided to add a little stroke around each of the shapes in the layers. You guys don't need to do this. I just felt like a stroke gave it a little bit of a certain finish. And then because I wanted the stroke to be uniform across the 6 layers, I basically right clicked and selected copy layer style so that I could paste the layer styles on each of the layers above it. Again, you don't have to do it. This was just my personal choice. Now that I'm done filling every layer with color, I'm ready to go to Window and open my timeline panel. I'm going to click in the middle where it says Create Frame Animation, and then I'm going to click on the bars on the top right side of the timeline panel, and I'm going to select the option that says Make Frames from Layers. In so doing, all of the layers are going to be imported into the timeline panel so that now I can go and adjust the time that they play in my frame animation. I'm basically clicking on the little number at the bottom of every frame, and I'm setting it to 0.2 so that I can just decrease the amount of time that they play. And you can basically go under each of those frames and set the time for each frame one by one, depending on how slow or how fast you want it to play. I'm clicking on the play button at the bottom of the timeline panel so I can preview it. You'll also see that there's a button that says Forever, which you can set to your frame animation playing without any stops or playing only once, 3 times, or however long you want it to play. I'm going to leave it to Forever because I just want it to play automatically. Because this is a very basic frame animation, I'm basically ready to export what I have. So I'm going to go to File, Export, and Save for Web Legacy. From here, I'm going to go to the top of the panel and select GIF as my file type. Then, over here, I can preview what that animation is going to look like. So I can see there's a little bit of streakiness, but ultimately, it's not that big of a deal to me. I'm going to make sure that I set it to 256 colors because I did use gradients, and I do want to try to retain as much of that blend of colors as much as possible. And then, once I preview it, I'm basically going to go and click Save at the bottom of the panel. I'm going to select my desktop as a destination and name it. So that's what it looks like when you're finished. Make sure you guys like the video. Bye!